All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Replace Your Income with Kevin and
Steve. How's it going, Kev?
Well, Steve, it is going as good as it could possibly go because we have the raddest guest today. And yes, I did say rad. And I know what you're thinking, Kev, nobody says rad. I do. Because this man, not only is he one of the most listened to conservative talk show hosts in the entire country, as well as a TV personality, as well as an altogether amazing human, but he also happens to be a client of Done For You Real Estate, and most importantly for me, somebody that I can call friend and somebody who I look up to and who is having a tremendous net impact on the country at large, and that is the one, the only Buck Sexton, who's on the podcast today. Buck, what's up, buddy?
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. That intro is far too kind. I will do what I can to not make it seem like we're talking crazy talk here as we go along. So,
well, Buck, you gave us the greatest compliment when you came on earlier, and we were just chatting. You called us your real estate bros. That was the
you
best.
guys are. You're my real estate bros. Like I love these guys. Just so everyone knows, not only am I a client of Done For You, which now, I mean, I'm building a whole portfolio, and this isn't like some ad. It's just true. I mean, we're on like house number 8 now. But I can ask them like random real estate questions, and they're never like, I'm busy. I'm the founder of a company. I'm a CEO, like whatever. They're like, oh yeah, like. They'll send me like charts and graphs and answers, and it's amazing. So I really appreciate you guys as a resource.
Well, and we appreciate you as well, and it was awesome. We had Buck came and was in Salt Lake. They did a show here, and he was here in Utah for a little while. We had a chance to go out to dinner with Buck and his beautiful wife, Carrie, and it was just such an amazing night. And so I just look, there's a lot of Buck Sexton and Clay Travis listeners right now. There's a lot of you who've heard Buck on the radio, and I anytime I talk to somebody, Buck, that knows you or has heard of you, I always tell them the same thing. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I always tell them that Buck is 100% the guy in real life that you hear on the radio. He is every bit as intelligent, every bit as kind, every bit as witty and quippy and phenomenal as he seems on the radio. And look, I've known some well-known folks over my years, and it's rare that somebody is as genuine and authentic, both on the air and doing their job as they are in real life. And that's you, Buck. And that's why you're here, because we want everybody to be able to feel that and hear that and see that you're just 100% you, and you have this incredible story. And so thank you so much for joining us, Buck. It's just awesome to have you.
Oh man, again, you guys are far too kind. I appreciate it, and it's been a great journey, man. You guys have turned me into a real estate investor. Yeah, we're friends, which is cool too. It's always nice to have new friends, but I'm a real estate investor now, thanks to you guys. I think I'll just start with this. The first house that I ever bought, true story, was not to live in. It was a Done For You investment property. And I sat down with these two guys. It's kind of a standard thing in the radio business. If you have a client who's interested in partnering for ads on radio, sometimes you'll meet with them and just to get a sense of the product and whatever. And as soon as they told me their philosophy, this was not required. Nobody was pushing me to do this at iHeart. It wasn't like, oh, can you do this? And I said, well, no, I don't just want to talk about this company and learn about it. I want to actually do what you guys are doing, meaning I want to be a client. I want to buy. And we did it right away. And we've been doing it now for years, and it's been working out very well. And so thank you guys for that, because, when you haven't done these things before, and I was in that, I come from New York City. Everyone just spends all their money on rent. That's like the New York thing, Maybe one day you get to buy something, if your Aunt Ethel leaves you like $5 million, you can buy a 1-bedroom apartment in New York. But yeah, I actually became a real estate investor because of you guys, so I owe you a lot.
Oh, well, thanks, Buck. That's awesome. Well, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on today, it's been a couple years since we've had you on the podcast. And as you know, right now, we're in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign for our new book called Microwins to Millions. And the entire premise of Microwins to Millions, for those of our listeners who know, I'll just kind of remind you, it's this idea that if we can stack enough microwins, hit enough real estate singles, we get on base enough in life and in real estate, it accumulates and starts to become something that's really tangible. But sometimes along the way, from where we begin and maybe quite a bit down the road, it feels like, are we really making progress? Is there really a lot that's taking place? But the the idea is if we could just keep stacking micro wins, celebrating as we go, it culminates into something really phenomenal. And your story, Buck, just not even just, your real estate story is phenomenal, but your story, right? How you went from being a CIA analyst to becoming a national, extremely popular national radio host, conservative, the voice of Americans across this great nation. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that story, because I know your story, and I know it was a lot of little things, doing the right things over and over again for an extended period of time. This was not hey, I'm in the CIA and now today I'm taking over the Rush Limbaugh show. There was a lot that went in between. I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about your story, Buck.
Sure. Well, yeah, in terms of the progression on the radio side, I am the classic 10-year-long overnight success, right? I mean, it took me 10 years and I became an overnight success, right? So people who know the radio business well would know that I spent not only years and years doing my own show before I teamed up with Clay in the evening syndicated. It's when I met you guys. But before that, I was doing a stream and really a podcast in the early days of podcasting at The Blaze. But I'm kind of going in reverse. So I'll just say this. To your point about micro wins, I think that in really all aspects of life, the greatest progress is incremental and is a function of consistency and discipline, and sometimes imperceptible movement. Meaning, and people who talk about, they'll look at media, they'll say, "Oh, but you get this big break." It's not that the progress is linear, but to get there, you have to do it every day, right? I mean, to get a big break in radio or any media opportunity, you have to do, there's always exceptions to anything, but for everybody I know who's been successful, you have to put in the work every day. And sometimes it feels like, is this really working? Is anyone listening? Does anyone care? Am I any good at this? But if you keep doing it every day, then you get into a position where you can have tremendous, as I say, non-linear, right? Like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I got this huge thing. Well, yeah, but the one day when you got the huge thing, you had 1,000 days before it of doing what you do, making the donut, so to speak, every day. And I think that's a really important, I know it's true in fitness, not that I'm like some fitness guy, I need to work on that, but it's for the people I know, I actually know, I'm friends with some very high level like fitness and bodybuilding competitors, and it's the work you do every day that matters. And I think that that's true professionally. I would argue it's true personally as well, right? It's, I always tell my wife this, not that I'm an expert in marriage, but I actually read a lot about relationships and marriage before I got married. And I realized that a lot of what I think people pick up on all that stuff, I'm not trying to make this into like a dating podcast, but a lot of what people pick up on it is not really helpful, not really true. It is the little stuff day to day that is everything. And the big anniversary gift or the trip to Barbados or, to Italy or whatever, that is, in my mind, for a healthy relationship, the celebration of, or, a particularly fun moment to bring together all the good, straightforward days before that, right? So your point about I think you can have micro wins in a relationship, whether with your spouse or a professional one. You can have it in fitness. You can have it in your day-to-day life. And this has really caught on. I mean, Jordan Peterson, for example, talks about the power of just get up and make your bed. And I know it sounds preposterous, but if you actually do it every day, and you have the right mentality about the rest of your day, you realize like starting your day with a win is a positive thing. Starting your day doing things that are building, that are positive, that are helping you. So as for how I got to this place, 9/11 happened, and honestly, because I had read a lot of Tom Clancy novels as a kid in like 7th and 8th grade, and I just was fascinated by the Jack Ryan character and that whole world. When 9/11 happened, I was a little bit older. I just kind of had this voice in my head. I had no previous like connection to the intelligence world, and I said, I'm gonna go help my country by joining the CIA. Far more people were like, I'm going to join the military, and I understand that that's something that was also a possibility for me. But in my head, it was I'm going to join the CIA, so I did. And then I didn't, people always ask like why I left the CIA. I didn't leave. I didn't quit. It wasn't that it wasn't really interesting and worthwhile work, but I was in New York and I was doing work for the NYPD Intelligence Division, which was very similar in the skill set to what the kind of work that I was doing in the CIA, just here at home instead of abroad. And I got this random email. And look, sometimes, luck plays a factor in these things. And the random email said, my boss heard about you at a Women in Technology conference. She'd like to meet with you. Well, I wasn't asking for this. I wasn't looking for this. I was actually on my way to go get an MBA, which I do not recommend for people. I didn't do it, but I do not. That's the debt that I don't want, like non-dischargeable. I like my real estate debt, building equity and making smart decisions. Non-dischargeable, $250,000 of student loans. I was a CIA. I had no money. That to me is the kind of debt that's worth avoiding. So yeah, I mean, I basically said, I'll have a coffee, and I met with this woman. Turned out she was the president of the Blaze, of Glenn Beck's new company. And they talked to me for a little bit. And it was kind of like the meeting I had with you guys where I was like, okay, yeah, I'm a real estate investor now. And I feel like at first you were kind of like, I don't know. I mean, you were like, really? Like, is this, because it sounds like a thing that a radio host would say to be like, come on, like sign here, but I'm like, no, really, like I want to be a real estate investor. They looked at me, or at the time, the woman who I have to thank for this, her name was Betsy Morgan. She looked at me and she's just like, you're going to come work for Glenn. And I looked at her and I said, no, you don't understand. I'm into Columbia Business School. I'm into NYU Stern. Like, these are great business schools. I'm actually waiting to hear back from Wharton at UPenn for the third round. So, little business school name dropping there for all the people that went to these places. And she kind of looks at me and she's just like, yeah, no, you're going to come work with us. And she's like, I'm going to bring Glenn in here. You're going to talk to Glenn. And that was it, man. And then I went to work for Glenn. And my attitude there, to your point about microwins, was I will do everything that I can in every different medium that I can to be the most useful and kind of utility player media talent I can possibly be. So I was writing, I was doing TV, I was doing radio, I was doing podcasting, I was, calling into other people's radio shows, you name it. Like I taught myself audio editing. I was just like, I want to be a one-stop shop for all things media. And that got me through. The Blaze was amazing. I've always said it was a little bit like, Charles Xavier. Glenn was like Charles Xavier, and we were like the kids working at the Blaze. We were his X-Men, because so many people came through there and went on to have big careers in Will Kane and Tommy Lahren and Lawrence Jones, and I can't name them all, but so many people came through the Blaze. And it was amazing because you got a lot of opportunity and you got a lot of training in media, which you really can't do elsewhere. You need to be at the level where you're comfortable, you're learning, but you're not making a fool of yourself. So, you have to kind of gauge these things. And the Blaze was amazing for that. And yeah, I mean, the short version of how I ended up filling in for Rush, back when Rush was doing his show, was just, I filled in for Glenn and it went really well. I remember Glenn called in when I was filling in for his radio show, and he just said, someone I really trust called me and said, this guy who's filling in for you is doing a phenomenal job. So I'm just calling in while you're hosting my show to say that you're doing an amazing job, and which was pretty cool as a first-time guest host. So yeah, no one else ever did that. So I never got anyone else calling in as much as I love the other people that I hosted Hannity's show and I hosted Rush's show. So yeah, that was how it went. I mean, from when I started radio until when I was guest hosting for Rush was about it was less than 3 years. I think it was about 2 years and change, which was very fast. But I just sort of kept on it.
That's awesome. And by the way, you doing everything that was required is how I discovered you. I remember listening to Glenn's show and heard you, and that was the first time I didn't know who you were. And I remember there was a segment where you were engaging some sort of history. You were talking about something. I felt like it had to do with the Navy. I don't know. And it was fascinating. And I went, who is this guy? And so then when the opportunity came later for us, as we were looking to expand nationally and let people know about us, when iHeart approached us about, hey, what would you think about going on Buck? My response and Steve's response right away was absolutely yes. And it was because of who you were. And I think that is a big, I don't know why iHeart chose to give the show to you and Clay, and you guys have earned it. You've done so much together. But I'd love to hear just briefly, and I know you've got to run soon, what was it like when you got the call? So here you have all of these years, right? You're with the CIA trying to serve your country. You get this phone call. You meet with this woman. You start to do the Blaze. You're doing everything necessary. You're filling in for some of the biggest names in talk radio, and you're doing your own show. It's nationally syndicated, and it's you. I remember talking to you when you were doing your own show, and I mean, you're doing 5-6 hours of media a day. You're doing TV. You're doing radio. You are doing everything that's required, stacking one micro win on top of the other. And I want to know, take me to that moment when you get the phone call or the email or however you were made aware that you may be taking over the largest radio show on the planet.
So I actually think the funnier story about it is the first time I got the fill-in for Rush call, because that was even early. I wasn't syndicated. I really only had my own digital show at the Blaze. And I will never forget Kit Carson, who sadly passed away, but he was a great guy. He was really Rush's chief of staff on his show for many, many years. Kit Carson called in. He's like, Buck Sexton? Kit Carson here. And I remember I've never had this experience before in my life. I was like, this is someone's messing with. Like, this is a joke. Like, I'm being put up. You know, I got a lot of friends in radio who do really good voice impressions. I'm like, someone's pretending, because he goes, how'd you like to fill in for Rush Limbaugh? And I'm just like, yeah, right, you know, in my head. But I'm like, that sounds like the most awesome thing I've ever heard. Like this, you know, I mean, I was like, turned out it was real. And so, yeah, that was how that went. And then I filled in for him. Funny story, and I know this sounds like I'll give you the very short version of this. I'm about to fill in for Rush, and I had a cold about a week before. I've never had this before in my life. I had full on, like, inflamed throat laryngitis. I couldn't speak at all. And it was the day before I was going to fill in for Rush. And I knew that if I didn't show up, everyone's going to think I was a chicken, right? I mean, just like I chickened out of this, which, by the way, some things people can say about me, I am not a chicken. Like, I will run up that hill and get mowed down. Like, and that's happened to me in a lot of things. I will not chicken out. But I knew that's what, you know, I can't call and say, oh, I have laryngitis. Like, really? You're filling in for Rush Limbaugh? You're the youngest person to ever do it. I think Hannity and I were like the same age. Hannity might have been a year younger, but whatever. You're the youngest person to ever do it, or close to it. And you're going to chicken out. I mean, so I had to get steroid injections to bring down the inflammation in my throat. And they only last 3 hours, gentlemen. So I had to get the shots in the morning, day of the show, hour before the show. And by the end of the show, like the last two segments, I could feel it swelling up again. I'm like, I went back to that. Gone. I was shaking for like a day afterwards. I knew that something was coming up and I didn't know what it was going to be. But, you know, because of the way that, you know, for months, it wasn't like a one call. It was like, we're going to have conversations. We're going to see, because they didn't want to, until they got Clay and me lined up and inked. It was like almost like a secret CIA thing. Like, they weren't really telling me. So you know what I mean? There wasn't that like, whoa, call. But the whoa moment was when the Wall Street Journal sent out a like a global Wall Street Journal push notification for the follow-on show for the Rush Limbaugh program has been announced, and it is Clay Travis and Buck Sexton. Because I had people that I hadn't heard from in 20 years, 30 years, who were like, this is amazing. So that was the real, that day was wild. That day was wild. So I knew, but it was made real in that moment, and that was pretty crazy.
I love that. Buck, as we kind of wrap the episode, because I know you got to get going, what advice would you give to somebody listening? They're wanting to accomplish something major, whether that's a 10 property portfolio or whether that's, you know, growing in their current line of work or changing careers or starting a business. But with this mentality that you so successfully utilized over all of these years to get to where you are, what advice would you give listeners of the Replace Your Income podcast, just generally about what they should be doing, or how should they go about dedicating themselves to accomplishing those things?
Oh boy. It's like, what's the secret to life by Buck Sexton?
That's
My
right.
real estate bros. You guys are, you know, usually at the end it's like, hey, like, what's your favorite movie? Or, you know what I mean? You guys are good. You guys are going all in at the end here. I would say the The most important thing for me that I wish I had learned a little bit sooner, but it's really important for your life and for just your mentality, but everything is learn to protect your time, and a part of that is view your time as valuable. And because when you view your time as valuable, it affects so many things. It affects how much you're willing to, do you really want to spend, I mean, just for as example, like in my 20s, is it really worth it to spend 24 hours recovering from the day before with like a terrible hangover? Not a problem for you guys, I know, but I'm just saying, like for some people, is it worth taking that meeting? Is it worth, the expenditure of your time in, watch a show at night before you go to bed or something, but like binge watch a show for 6 hours, maybe once in a while, but like make a habit of that. I mean, I just think understanding the value and the finite nature of your time is something that is really important. But the principal thing is learn to protect it, because what you find out is there's so many demands, and also I think the more productive a person you become and the more mission driven you are for taking care of your family and take care of your friends and doing good work and building worthwhile things and buying houses with the real estate bros, you need to understand that there are going to be a lot of people that usually it's not like a nefarious thing, but it's just a lot of demands on your time, and you have to be, because no one else will do it for you. And I know so many people that I think don't really get to reach their goal or their potential because there are all these time sucks. It's like the time leeches just start attaching on everything, and you have to be rigid about the value of your own time, and you have to protect it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Buck. Thank you for joining us. Can I ask you to do one last thing? Will you take us out of this podcast with a little bit of Dr. Fauci?
Gentlemen, I wish I had little glasses and a white lab coat to add to the gravitas of this, but I would just say neither of you are masked right now, which is very upsetting. Mitigation measures need to be elevated, and also, despite your lack of seriousness with the virus, I do think your real estate advice is excellent. So thank you. Thank you for that.
That was the best ending of our podcast in history. Buck, thank you for joining us. We love you, man. Thank you for being an amazing friend, an amazing client, for sharing your story, and God bless you, my friend.
Anytime.
Thanks, Buck.
Gentlemen. Talk to you soon.
Shield time.
Take care.
Bye.
One of the things I really appreciated about what Buck just shared was that idea of valuing your time. He could have said, we didn't really prep him too much for that question. That was just a question we felt like we wanted to ask him. And I like to catch people off guard with questions like that, because here's what you find. When you ask somebody a question that they're not prepared for, there's actually a technique in that. You generally find out what they value the most, right? Most people will default to that core belief system, who they really are and what they believe. And so I kind of wanted to hit him with that. And he said, learn to value your time. And I don't know if you had this experience, but as he was talking about that, I thought, boy, that is precisely what we've tried to create an environment for with Done For You Real Estate and with Microwins to Millions as a book. If we can save people the time and the effort that would normally go into it on their own, how much more time do they get back to be with the people they love the most, to do the things they enjoy the most, but still be able to create the possibility, the achievement, and the wealth that they want from a real estate standpoint?
Well, and what's also interesting about what he said is when he was younger, he didn't quite understand that concept. It wasn't until he's a little bit older, not that he's old, he's in his 40s. I think you guys are similar in age.
Yeah, he's same age as my wife. So I'm 44. I think he's 42, 43, somewhere in there.
I'm 10 years older than you. I'm 54 now. I don't consider that necessarily old, but I also, it's like the time factor. I feel a greater sense of urgency to be doing the things that are most impactful, right? In my life, for those that I love, for creating, really, at the end of the day, the opportunity of having impact in people's lives in a very positive way. And to what you said, like that is the essence of what we're doing in terms of taking people who are very busy doing what they are doing on a regular basis and helping them accomplish something great on the real estate front, on the investment front, that quite literally is going to have one of the greatest impacts on their time and what they can do with their time when they retire, potentially retiring multiple years earlier than would have otherwise been possible. Like, you can't get back those years that they get to now enjoy with their family, with their grandchildren, with doing whatever it is that they want and love and would love to be doing. Like, there's a great amount of satisfaction in that. And I loved what Buck said in terms of using your time in such a way that that you feel like at the end of the day that it was time well spent, that it wasn't squandered, that you weren't spending time recovering for 24 hours, after a crazy night or something. So I really appreciate what he said. And here's the last thing that I'll say on that. I think there was kind of an implication in what he said, in that he was willing to spend 30 minutes in the middle of his day to come and hang out with us and contribute to us and to Microwins to Millions and to the launch of our book through Kickstarter. What greater gift could he have given to us, right?
Yeah.
Than the gift of the time that he spent with us today.
I had the same thought. He had to run. For those of you listening, he had to run because he has another podcast that he is recording for iHeartRadio. Not little Steve and Kev over at DFY with Replace Your Income, but a massive national podcast that probably has millions of downloads. But he spent a half hour with us, with you all listening right now, to contribute value. And so to me, I know that our relationship with Buck has blossomed. Just to kind of remind everybody, the first time, so for those of you that if this is your first introduction to Buck Sexton, go look him up. He hosts the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show. It's in what used to be the Rush Limbaugh spot, and he's often a guest on television and other radio programs. Phenomenal guy. You should look him up. But when we first started to advertise with him, Steve, you and I wanted to take some of our precious time away from our families because we believed that building a relationship with somebody of his stature, of his just nature, who he was important. And I remember, Steve, you and I having this conversation as we arrived in New York and we were going to go to the big iHeart skyscraper to go and meet with Buck after he completed his show. I remember, you and I went because we wanted Buck to understand something really clearly. Not just that real estate was awesome. He's the one that kind of chased us down to say, hey, let me do real estate with you guys. We didn't ask him to do real estate with us. But what we wanted him to know is that the people that are doing real estate with Done For You Real Estate, or that are out there trying to invest and stack micro wins and create success, they are real people. They are the kinds of people that listen to his show. They are the teachers, the doctors, the dentists, the plumbers, the electricians, the engineers. It's everybody out there putting in the time and the work to try to create a better life for themselves and for their family. And we wanted him to know it's about those individuals. It's about everybody listening right now and your individual story and your individual road to success with real estate. And I remember we even took an email that I'd received from one of his listeners who had started to engage with our company, because I wanted Buck to feel the gratitude that his listeners had for him and just for what we were trying to do at Done For You Real Estate. And so as we've blossomed this relationship with Buck, as we've done more and more real estate with he and his brothers, and continue to help them build this portfolio, it was just really cool for me to have him come on. The last time he did a podcast with us, it was the last election year. Do you realize that? It was in 2020 because it was the election.
Right as the pandemic was starting.
That's right. And so for him to come back on now after doing real estate with us for 4 years and starting to grow his portfolio personally and with his brothers, and to spend time for this audience and for this podcast to talk a little bit about micro wins, to talk about the advantage of understanding time in your life, to me is just such a cool evolution, both of Buck, of what he's accomplished, of what we're trying to do collectively here on the Replace Your Income podcast. And it's all the more reason reason why I hope that everybody listening, if you have not already, I would encourage you to please go to microwinstomillions.com and consider supporting the Kickstarter. You know, the way Kickstarter works, I've mentioned it on some of our social media posts, but you know, you're not charged. You're pledging. You're saying, hey, if these guys can fully fund this project, this Micro Wins to Millions project, then, you know, I'll give my $30. But for now, I'm pledging $30 or $300 or whatever the number is. And there's all these cool rewards and all these cool packages and all this cool stuff that you can get with your pledge if we fully fund the product. And so we hope that this was beneficial and fun to listen to Buck and to hear a little bit of his perspective. And we hope that you'll go to microwinstomillions.com, back the Kickstarter, help us get this message out to as many people as possible. A big reason why we're on Kickstarter is we're hoping that and this is part of the strategy, just so everybody knows kind of behind the curtains, as we fund the Kickstarter, and if Kickstarter notices that our project is going well and getting funded, they start to advertise our book to all of everybody that's ever donated. So I think Kickstarter's collected like $7 or $8 billion in pledges and in backed projects. So they start to market Micro Wins to Millions to everybody in the world to say, hey, maybe this is something you ought to look at. And that's really the hope. We're hoping that with Kickstarter, we can get in front of people that otherwise don't know we exist, so that they can learn some of what Buck shared, so that they can be introduced into this world, so that they can see that they can change their life one property at a time, so they can understand that it's not about swinging for the fences, but it's about stacking micro wins. And so we just encourage everybody to go to microwinstomillions.com, consider backing the Kickstarter. We'd be very appreciative, and we hope that today was fun and informative for everybody.
It was awesome, Kev. It was great doing this podcast with you and having Buck on the show. I always appreciate the words of wisdom that you have, and today was no exception. Appreciate the genuine, the genuineness, the sincerity. From my perspective, to anybody who's listening today, you know, as my business partner, Kev is one of the best. He is the best, and appreciate you so much, Kev. Thanks for hosting the show today.
Thank you, brother. Thank you to everybody for listening. Go to microwinstomillions.com. Remember to rate and review the podcast. Go check out Buck Sexton and his amazing show, The Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, and we'll talk to y'all real soon.